"Stop the car, now." The command cut through the humid Los Angeles air like a blade. Michael Jackson's security team exchanged confused glances as their black SUV idled at a red light on Sunset Boulevard. It was 2:47 a.m. on June 15, 1995, and the King of Pop had just finished a grueling 14-hour recording session at Capitol Records. Everyone expected him to head straight home to Neverland Ranch, but Michael was staring at something through the tinted window that made him forget his exhaustion entirely. On the corner, illuminated by a flickering streetlight, a homeless man sat with his back against a graffiti-covered wall. But he wasn't begging, he was singing. And what made Michael's heart stop wasn't just the man's voice. It was the song he was singing, "Man in the Mirror." "Sir, we really should keep moving," Frank DeLio, Michael's manager, urged from the front seat. "It's not safe here at this hour." But Michael was already opening the door. What happened in the next 17 minutes would challenge everything Michael thought he knew about success, failure, and the thin line between them. Because the homeless man singing his song had a secret that would shake Michael to his core and force him to confront the most painful question of his life. What does it mean to truly make a difference? His name was David Martinez, though most people who passed him on Sunset Boulevard just called him the singing homeless guy. At 42 years old, David had been living on the streets of Los Angeles for 3 years, ever since a series of devastating losses had stripped away everything he once had: his job as a high school music teacher, his marriage, his home, and nearly his will to live. But David had one thing left: his voice. And every night, in the hours when the city quieted and the tourists disappeared, he would sing. Not for money, though he kept a cardboard box nearby for the occasional coin. He sang because it was the only thing that still made him feel human. Tonight he had been singing "Man in the Mirror" on repeat for almost an hour. The song had become something of an anthem for him, a reminder of the person he used to be and the person he desperately wanted to become again. "I'm starting with the man in the mirror," David sang, his voice cracking with emotion. "I'm asking him to change his ways." He didn't notice the black SUV that had pulled over across the street. He didn't see the security team scrambling to protect their client. He was lost in the music, lost in the memory of better days when he stood in front of a classroom of eager students, teaching them that music could save lives. David's own life had unraveled slowly, then all at once. First came the school budget cuts that eliminated the music program. Then his wife left, unable to cope with the financial strain and his deepening depression. The apartment went next, then the car. Within 6 months, David Martinez went from respected educator to invisible statistic. But here's what nobody knew. Not the people who hurried past him every day. Not the police who occasionally moved him along. Not even David himself until this very moment. His story was about to intersect with destiny in a way that would change 2 lives forever. Michael Jackson stood on the opposite sidewalk, his security team forming a protective circle around him. He wore a black fedora pulled low, sunglasses despite the late hour, and a medical mask, his standard disguise for venturing into public spaces. But his attention was completely fixed on the man singing his song. "That voice," Michael whispered. "Do you hear that voice?" Frank DeLeo was more concerned with safety protocols than vocal talent. "Michael, please get back in the car. This area." Michael held up one gloved hand. "Just listen." And they did. Even the hardened security professionals found themselves moved by the raw emotion in David's performance. This wasn't a street performer looking for tips. This was a man pouring his soul into every note, singing like his life depended on it, because in a way, it did. Michael had heard countless covers of his songs, from polished performances by international superstars to karaoke renditions by enthusiastic amateurs. But something about this homeless man's interpretation reached him in a place he'd kept carefully guarded for years. This wasn't performance, this was prayer. "I'm gonna make a change," David sang, tears streaming down his weathered face. "For once in my life." Michael started walking toward him. "Sir," the lead security guard stepped forward. "We haven't cleared the area." "Then clear it," Michael said quietly. "I need to talk to this man." Frank DeLio recognized that tone. It was the same voice Michael used when he'd made a decision that no amount of logic or persuasion would change. "At least let us go first," Frank pleaded. Michael nodded, but he never took his eyes off David. As the security team approached, David finally looked up. His eyes widened as he took in the scene. Black-suited men emerging from an expensive SUV, moving with military precision, clearly heading toward him. His first thought was that he was about to be arrested for loitering or disturbing the peace. He stopped singing and raised his hands. I'm going. I didn't mean any trouble." "Nobody's arresting you," said the lead security guard. "Someone wants to meet you." David's confusion deepened. Then he saw the figure in the black fedora and sunglasses stepping into the streetlight. "Hello," Michael Jackson said softly. "I'm Michael." The conversation that changed everything. For several seconds, David Martinez couldn't speak. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound emerged. Of all the scenarios he'd imagined during his 3 years on the street, having Michael Jackson approach him at 3 a.m. on Sunset Boulevard had never made the list. You're, David finally managed. "I heard you singing my song," Michael said, removing his sunglasses. Those famous eyes, which had captivated billions of people across 6 decades, now looked directly into David's. "You have an extraordinary voice." "I thank you. I'm sorry. I didn't mean." "Don't apologize." Michael moved closer, ignoring the nervous tension of his security team. "That was one of the most moving performances of Man in the Mirror I've ever heard, and I've heard thousands." David felt tears forming again. "It's my favorite song. It helped me through some dark times." "Tell me about them," Michael said. And then, to everyone's shock, he sat down on the sidewalk next to David. "Sir, you can't," the security guard began. "I'm fine," Michael said firmly. Then softer, to David, "If you're comfortable sharing." What poured out of David Martinez over the next hour was a story of loss, failure, and survival that shook Michael more deeply than he expected. David spoke about his 15 years as a music teacher, about the students whose lives he'd touched, about the school board meeting where they announced the program cuts that would eliminate his position. "Music was the first thing they cut," David said bitterly. "Always is, like it's some luxury instead of something essential. But I saw what music did for those kids. I saw the shy ones find their voices. I saw the angry ones find an outlet. I saw the lonely ones find connection." Michael nodded. He understood more than David knew. "After I lost my job, everything else fell apart. My wife couldn't take the stress. I got depressed, couldn't find another teaching position, couldn't pay rent. And then," David gestured at their surroundings, "3 years on the street." "But you kept singing," Michael observed. "It's the only thing that still makes sense," David said. "When I'm singing, I'm not homeless. I'm not a failure. I'm just me, the person I was supposed to be." Michael was silent for a long moment. Then he asked the question that had been burning in his mind. "Why Man in the Mirror?" David looked at him with surprising intensity. "Because that song is about taking responsibility, about not blaming the world for your problems, about looking at yourself honestly and deciding to change." He paused. "I sing it every night because I'm trying to figure out who that man in the mirror is anymore, and who he could still become." But here's what David didn't know. While David Martinez had been living on the streets of Los Angeles for 3 years, struggling to survive and maintain his dignity, his former students had never forgotten him. In fact, unbeknownst to David, his impact on their lives had been so profound that several of them had achieved remarkable success in the music industry, and they credited him as the teacher who'd changed everything. Among them was Jessica Chen, now a Grammy-nominated producer who worked regularly with some of the biggest names in music. She'd been one of David's students during his final year of teaching, a shy 14-year-old who'd never believed she had any musical talent until Mr. Martinez heard her humming in the hallway and insisted she join the school choir. Marcus Williams, a successful music video director, had been a troubled kid heading down a dangerous path until David Martinez gave him a keyboard and taught him to channel his anger into composition. Marcus was now earning 6 figures and had just directed a video for a major pop star. There was Sarah Kim, performing on Broadway, Antonio Rodriguez, touring with a nationally recognized jazz ensemble, Emma Thompson, teaching music at a prestigious private academy where her program was thriving and fully funded, all of them students who'd had their lives transformed by David Martinez during his 15 years of teaching. All of them searching for him since his disappearance, trying to find the man who'd believed in them when nobody else did. All of them wanting to say thank you. But the school district had no forwarding information. David's ex-wife had moved and changed her number. His old friends had lost touch. For 3 years, these former students had been looking for their teacher, with no idea that he was living on the street just miles from where several of them now worked. And Michael Jackson, sitting on that sidewalk at 3 a.m., listening to David's story, didn't know any of this yet either, but he was about to find out. As David finished his story, Michael sat in thoughtful silence. The security team had established a perimeter, keeping curious onlookers at a distance. Frank DeLeo had stopped checking his watch, recognizing that this impromptu encounter had become something significant. "David," Michael finally said, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you regret it? Dedicating your life to teaching music to kids who couldn't afford private lessons? Choosing a path that led to..." He gestured at their surroundings. The question clearly caught David off guard. He thought for a long moment before answering. "You want the truth?" David asked. "Always. Some days, when I'm cold and hungry and people look through me like I'm invisible. Yes, I regret every choice that led me here." David's voice was raw with honesty. "But then I think about Angelica, this girl who stuttered so badly she could barely speak, but when she sang, perfect, no stutter at all. Music gave her a voice." Michael leaned forward. "Or Marcus, this kid who was in a gang, heading toward prison or worse. I kept him after school every day for a year, teaching him piano. Last I heard he was planning to study music in college. David wiped his eyes. If I hadn't been there, if the music program hadn't existed, where would those kids be now? So you don't regret it, Michael said softly. I regret how it ended, David clarified. But the work itself? Never. Even if nobody remembers, even if it all meant nothing in the end. What if it didn't mean nothing? Michael asked. What if those students you taught went on to do extraordinary things? What if your influence rippled out into the world in ways you never saw? That would be nice to believe, David said with a sad smile. But I'm not sure it matters now. I failed them in the end by disappearing. Michael stood up, dusting off his pants. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. David, I'm going to ask you to trust me. Can you do that? I guess? Good. Michael dialed a number. When it connected, he said, Frank, I need you to do something for me. Find every student who studied under David Martinez at Roosevelt High School between 1979 and 1993. Track down where they are now and what they're doing. I want a full report by tomorrow afternoon. He hung up and looked at David. Now, I need you to come with me. Come where? Somewhere safe. Somewhere you can clean up, get some food, and rest. Because tomorrow, I have a feeling you're going to need your strength. 28 hours later, David Martinez stood in a private recording studio in Burbank, clean-shaven, wearing new clothes, and completely confused about what was happening. Michael had set him up in a hotel suite the night before with instructions to rest and trust. Now he'd been brought to this studio with no explanation. Michael entered with Frank DeLio, who carried a thick folder. David, do you remember a student named Jessica Chen? Michael asked. Jessica? Of course. Shy girl, incredible ear for harmony. She was in my last year of teaching. Why? Michael gestured to Frank, who opened the folder and began reading. Jessica Chen, age 28, Grammy-nominated music producer, currently working with artists including Alicia Keys, John Legend, and… Frank paused for effect. Me. David's legs felt weak. What? Marcus Williams, Frank continued, age 27, music video director with over 50 million views across his portfolio. He directed 3 of the top 10 videos from last year. That can't be. Sarah Kim, Broadway performer in the current production of The Lion King. Antonio Rodriguez, first chair trumpet in the Los Angeles Jazz Collective. Emma Thompson, head of music education at Westwood Academy, where her program serves 500 students annually. Frank kept reading, name after name, student after student, each one successful, each one crediting a music teacher named David Martinez as the person who'd changed their trajectory. We found 37 of your former students, Michael said gently. Every single one had a story about how you believed in them when nobody else did, how you saw potential they didn't know they had, how you gave them the tools to build extraordinary lives. David was crying now, his shoulders shaking. I had no idea. I never… And they've been looking for you, Michael continued. For 3 years, these people have been trying to track you down. They wanted to say thank you. They wanted to show you what they'd become. Michael walked to the studio door and opened it. Standing in the hallway were 37 people. David's former students, all grown up, all successful, all there because of him. Mr. Martinez, Jessica Chen rushed forward. We've been searching everywhere. You changed my life, Marcus Williams said, his voice thick with emotion. One by one, they embraced him, told their stories, showed him how the seeds he'd planted had grown into forests. What happened over the next 6 months became a story that media outlets would cover extensively, though Michael insisted on keeping his role mostly private. The 37 former students, successful in their various fields, pooled resources to create the David Martinez Music Education Fund. The foundation provided instruments, lessons, and full scholarships to underprivileged students who showed musical aptitude but lacked financial means. David himself became the fund's director, speaking at schools, advocating for music education, and mentoring young teachers. His story of redemption resonated with educators nationwide who felt undervalued and forgotten. But perhaps more importantly, David's encounter with Michael sparked a larger conversation about how society treats its teachers, its homeless population, and its most vulnerable citizens. Michael used his platform to amplify David's message that the work of education is sacred, that every person has inherent value regardless of their current circumstances, and that sometimes the most important success stories take years to reveal themselves. Michael and David became close friends. They would meet monthly, usually late at night when Michael could move through the city with some degree of privacy. They'd talk about music, about life, about the responsibility that comes with influence. You know what haunts me? Michael confided during one of these meetings. I've sold millions of records, performed for millions of people, won every award, But sometimes I wonder if any of it really matters. If I'm actually making a difference or just entertaining people." David looked at him seriously. "You pulled over at 3 a.m. to listen to a homeless man sing your song. Then you didn't just give me money and leave. You investigated my story. You found my students. You helped me rebuild my life. You're using your platform to advocate for music education in homeless populations." He paused. "Does that sound like someone who's just entertaining people? But is it enough?" Michael asked. "With everything I have, all the resources, the influence, should I be doing more?" "Here's what I learned on those streets," David said. "Impact isn't always measured in scale. Yes, you can reach millions with your music, but you can also change one person's life completely, and that person can go on to change others, and those people change others, and the ripples spread wider than you'll ever see. You didn't save 37 people that night, you saved me. But through me, you reached them. Through them, you'll reach thousands more." 18 months after that night on Sunset Boulevard, Michael Jackson announced a special concert, an evening for music education. All proceeds would benefit the David Martinez Fund and similar organizations nationwide. The star-studded event at the Staples Center drew performers from across the industry, but the most powerful moment came when Michael invited David on stage. "This man taught me something important," Michael told the audience of 20,000. "He reminded me that success isn't measured by awards or album sales. It's measured by the lives you touch and the difference you make when nobody's watching." Then Michael did something unprecedented. He invited all 37 of David's former students, who were in the music industry, to join them on stage. Together, students and teacher, they performed "Man in the Mirror." As David sang the words he'd sung alone on that street corner, now surrounded by the proof of his life's work, he finally understood something. He hadn't failed. The 3 years on the street weren't the end of his story. They were the middle. The chapter where everything seemed lost before the redemption came. And Michael, watching David embrace his former students while 20,000 people gave a standing ovation, finally had an answer to the question that had haunted him. Yes, it matters. All of it matters. Every song, every performance, every time you stop the car at 3 a.m. because you hear someone who needs to be heard. Years later, when journalists would ask Michael Jackson about his proudest achievements, he would often mention the David Martinez encounter. Not because it was his biggest accomplishment, but because it reminded him why he'd become an artist in the first place. David Martinez's story became required reading in education programs nationwide. His foundation expanded to serve thousands of students. 5 years after being homeless, he was invited to testify before Congress about music education funding. But perhaps most importantly, the story changed how people saw the homeless population in Los Angeles and beyond. The man singing on the corner wasn't just a statistic or an eyesore to be avoided. He was a person with a story, with value, with the potential for redemption and transformation. "Everyone you pass on the street has a story," Michael would later say in interviews. "Everyone deserves to be seen, to be heard, to be treated with dignity. David wasn't lucky because I stopped that night. I was lucky because he was singing." The 37 former students all went on to incorporate teaching and mentorship into their careers. Jessica Chen started offering free production workshops. Marcus Williams mentored young directors. Sarah Kim taught free voice lessons in her spare time, each of them paying forward what David Martinez had given them. And on quiet nights when Michael felt overwhelmed by fame, pressure, or the loneliness that sometimes came with his unique position in the world, he would think about David singing "Man in the Mirror" on that dark corner, about how the world's biggest superstar and a homeless music teacher had found common ground in a song about looking honestly at yourself and choosing to change, because that's what both of them had done. Michael had looked at his life and decided to stop rushing past the people who needed help. David had looked at his circumstances and decided they didn't define his value or his ability to contribute. 2 men, 1 song, a chance encounter that became a lasting friendship and a lesson about what really matters. The last time Michael and David met was 3 months before Michael's death in 2009. They sat in Michael's private studio at Neverland Ranch, listening to early demos of unreleased tracks. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't stopped that night?" Michael asked. David considered the question. "I think eventually someone else would have helped me, or I'd have helped myself, but it would have taken longer, and it wouldn't have meant as much." "Why?" "Because you didn't help me despite who you were. You used your resources, your influence, your platform not just to give me money or offer sympathy, but to restore something I'd lost, my sense of purpose. You reminded me that the work I'd done mattered, that I'd mattered." Michael was quiet for a long moment. "You gave me something too." "What's that?" "You showed me that impact isn't about the size of your audience, it's about the depth of your connection. I'd been so focused on reaching millions that I forgot about the power of reaching one person completely. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the music. Michael, David finally said, "Thank you for stopping the car that night. Thank you for being worth stopping for," Michael replied. Today, the David Martinez Music Education Fund operates in 47 states, serving over 50,000 students annually. The foundation provides instruments, lessons, and full scholarships to children who show musical aptitude but lack financial resources. Every student who receives a Martinez Fund scholarship is told David's story, not as inspiration porn about a homeless man being saved, but as a reminder that everyone has value, everyone deserves dignity, and everyone's story can change in an instant if someone bothers to stop and listen. The 37 original students, now leaders in their respective fields, serve on the foundation's board. They've established mentorship programs, summer camps, and partnerships with school districts nationwide. They estimate that their collective impact has touched over 100,000 young musicians. David Martinez, now 68, continues to travel the country speaking about music education, homelessness, and the transformative power of believing in people. His TED Talk, "The Teacher Who Lived in Shadows," has been viewed over 20 million times. In 2019, on the 10th anniversary of Michael Jackson's death, David returned to that corner on Sunset Boulevard. A small crowd had gathered, word having spread that he planned to be there. At exactly 2:47 a.m., the time Michael had stopped that night, David began singing "Man in the Mirror." This time, he wasn't alone. Hundreds of people joined him. Former students, current students, teachers, musicians, homeless individuals receiving services from organizations inspired by David's story. They sang together in the place where one man's darkest night had become his redemption. As the final notes faded, David spoke to the crowd. 15 years ago, I was at my lowest point, and someone stopped to listen. Really listen. Not just to my singing, but to my story. Tonight, I want to challenge all of you. Who are you walking past? Who are you not hearing? Whose story are you missing because you're in too much of a hurry? The question hung in the warm Los Angeles air. Because that's the real lesson of that night. Not that a celebrity saved a homeless man, but that one human being saw another human being's value and decided to act. That kindness, combined with action, can transform lives. That the work we do when we think nobody's watching might be the most important work we ever do. That everyone, regardless of circumstances, deserves to be seen, heard, and valued. And that sometimes, the person singing on the corner knows something the rest of us need to learn.